Tell me again, Chuck said quietly, how this car has 0 hidden fees. The salesman grinned, too quickly. Trust me, sir. Everything's clean. But Chuck Norris didn't trust blindly. And beneath the showroom lights, he had just spotted the first lie. Behind closed doors, they were erasing complaints, forging numbers, and smirking while they did it. Until Chuck went undercover, and the dealership's darkest secrets came to light. Welcome to Chuck Norris Heroics. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun was setting behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Inside a modest, dimly lit room, Chuck Norris sat calmly, his steely gaze fixed on the file in front of him. The man in the picture was a smiling salesman at one of Chuck's own car dealerships, a man who seemed harmless enough, yet rumors suggested otherwise. The reports were unsettling, customers feeling misled, promises broken, and deals that seemed too good to be true, but never quite adding up. For someone like Chuck Norris, reputation and integrity were everything, especially in a business he had built with his own hands. He had built more than just a business empire. He had created a name synonymous with honesty and respect. That was why he couldn't ignore the whispers reaching his ears. It wasn't enough to trust the numbers or hear secondhand complaints. This was a matter that needed personal attention. Chuck wasn't just a martial arts legend or a Hollywood icon. He was a man who stood by his principles, no matter the cost. If someone in his dealership was undermining that trust, he would find out. He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look crossing his weathered face. The decision was clear. To get to the bottom of this, he would have to step out of the spotlight and step into the shoes of an everyday customer. Chuck Norris, the legendary fighter, the star, would become an undercover man, incognito, observing, learning, and uncovering the truth. He began mapping out his plan. No cameras, no entourage, just Chuck blending in with the crowd, navigating the showroom floor with keen eyes and a mind sharpened by decades of discipline and experience. He knew this mission would test him in a different way, not with fists or kicks, but with patience and subtlety. Because some battles were fought not in the ring, but in plain sight, hidden behind smiles and sales pitches. And Chuck Norris was ready to take on this new challenge, to protect his name and the customers who trusted him. This mission was personal. The legend was about to go undercover. Late one evening, as the dealership's lights dimmed and the last customers filtered out, Chuck Norris received a call that unsettled him. The voice on the other end was hushed, nervous, an employee who had witnessed something troubling but feared speaking up openly. "Sir, I don't want to cause trouble, but something's not right here," the caller whispered. "There's a salesman. He's been bending the truth, making promises he can't keep, and some customers are walking away feeling cheated." Chuck listened intently, every word sharpening his resolve. This wasn't just a minor hiccup. It was a crack threatening to fracture everything he had built. He knew that in any business, rumors could swirl, but this call carried weight, the kind of insider knowledge that couldn't be ignored. The man on the phone described late-night deals made behind closed doors, inflated numbers, and the growing unease among the staff. "I thought maybe you should know, sir. It feels wrong. People trust us, and if one man's breaking that trust, it's a problem bigger than any of us." Chuck's jaw tightened. Trust was the foundation on which his empire stood. If even one link in that chain was weak, it could unravel the entire legacy. As he hung up, Chuck paced the room, thinking back to the calls and messages he'd brushed off as typical business noise. Now, the pieces fell into place, the odd complaints, the customer cancellations, the whispered frustrations among his trusted employees. He couldn't let doubt fester any longer. If someone was deceiving customers under his roof, it was more than a betrayal of business. It was a personal affront. His mind raced with questions. Who was this salesman? How deep did the deception run? And most importantly, how would he expose the truth without tipping off those involved? Chuck knew he couldn't confront the problem head-on as himself. His name carried weight, and suspicion would rise immediately. The only way was to walk in as someone invisible, to watch, listen, and learn without drawing attention. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. Chuck Norris was ready to act. This was no longer just about a business. It was about justice, honor, and protecting the people who believed in him. The undercover mission was no longer an option. It was a necessity. Chuck stood in front of the mirror, studying his reflection with a quiet intensity. The face staring back was familiar, the same steely eyes, the rugged jawline. But today it needed to be someone else. Someone unrecognizable. For the first time in years, Chuck Norris would step away from the legend and step into a disguise. It was a small act of rebellion against his own fame, but a necessary one if he wanted to move unnoticed through his dealership. He ran a hand through his hair, which he decided to rough up and let fall messily over his forehead. The clean-shaven look would have to go. He grew a subtle 5 o'clock shadow to soften his distinct features. Then came the clothes, nothing flashy, no hint of celebrity. A simple baseball cap pulled low, a faded jacket that had seen better days, and jeans worn enough to blend into any crowd. His polished boots gave way to scuffed sneakers. He looked like any ordinary man, ready to walk through the doors without raising a single eyebrow. Chuck practiced a casual walk, slowing his usual purposeful stride to something more unassuming. His posture softened, and he forced a relaxed expression. No confident smirk, no piercing stare, just a man trying not to be noticed. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental. He needed to observe without influence, to blend in without commanding the room. He checked his phone and rehearsed his story. A potential buyer interested in a reliable used car, cautious but curious. Nothing that would invite too many questions, but enough to engage with the sales staff. He wanted to test the waters, see how the team treated a normal customer. As he stepped out of the room, his heart beat steady, but with a hint of anticipation. This was unfamiliar territory for a man used to commanding respect with a glance or a handshake. But Chuck was no stranger to challenges. Whether in the ring or on the screen, he had faced far tougher battles. Today's fight was different. It was about uncovering deceit, restoring trust, and protecting what he had built. Chuck Norris, disguised and determined, was ready to enter the lion's den for the very first time. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and Chuck stepped into the bustling dealership. The bright overhead lights reflected off the polished cars lined up like trophies, each one gleaming under the showroom's glow. To everyone else, he was just another customer. Head down slightly, baseball cap shading his face, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his worn jacket. His every step was careful, deliberate, blending seamlessly into the ebb and flow of shoppers and salespeople alike. The hum of conversation filled the air. Laughter from a family inspecting a minivan, the polite but eager pitch of a salesman weaving through the crowd, the occasional ringing of a phone behind the sales desks. Chuck's eyes scanned the scene, sharp and calculating despite the disguise. Here, beneath the surface of smiles and polished sales tactics, he would uncover the truth. He moved slowly, observing the salesmen clustered near the desks. Some greeted customers with practiced enthusiasm, while others looked distracted, eyes flicking to their phones or glancing nervously around. Chuck felt a familiar tension rising in his chest, the kind that signaled a challenge waiting to be met. But outwardly, he remained calm, an unremarkable figure navigating the maze of glossy brochures and promotional signs. A tall man with a slick smile approached, his handshake firm but rehearsed. "Good afternoon, sir. Looking for something in particular today?" The salesman's eyes scanned Chuck's face briefly, trying to place the stranger. Chuck smiled faintly, voice steady but cautious. "Just browsing for now. Heard you have some reliable used cars." The salesman's grin widened, and he gestured toward the rows of vehicles. "Absolutely. We've got some great deals today. Let me know if you have any questions." Chuck nodded, taking a few steps toward the nearest lot of used cars. Every word, every gesture was being measured, filed away for later. As he wandered between the rows, he noticed subtle exchanges, whispers behind the manager's glass office, a quick exchange of notes, a salesman's hurried call on a hidden phone. This was no ordinary visit. The atmosphere hinted at secrets lurking just beneath the showroom's shiny surface. Chuck Norris, disguised and determined, was now fully inside his own world, but this time he was the outsider watching from within. Chuck moved quietly through the showroom, his eyes scanning every detail with a veteran's precision. The sales team operated with polished professionalism on the surface, but beneath that practiced veneer, subtle signs of tension flickered like shadows. Some wore genuine smiles, while others seemed to hide something just beneath their calm exteriors. One salesman caught Chuck's attention, a man with slick-back hair and a too-bright smile. He moved with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance, greeting customers with a smooth charm that felt rehearsed rather than sincere. Chuck noticed the way his eyes darted quickly toward the manager's office whenever he thought no one was watching. There was a nervous energy there, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Across the floor, another team member appeared quieter, almost too reserved. His polite nods and careful answers seemed designed to avoid any real engagement, as if he was shielding himself from something unsaid. Chuck sensed unease in the air, a silent tension shared among some of the staff, like they were carrying a secret too heavy to voice. As Chuck observed, a few salesmen exchanged quick glances and whispered behind their hands when they thought customers weren't paying attention. It was the language of suspicion, subtle yet unmistakable. Something was happening behind the scenes, an unspoken story that no one wanted to reveal openly. Chuck's instincts told him that the slick salesman was likely at the center of it. His easy charm was a mask for something less honest. The question was how deep the deception went and how many others were involved or turning a blind eye. Despite the calm facade of the showroom, Chuck felt the weight of hidden faces and guarded hearts. This was a team divided, some caught in the web of lies, others quietly uncomfortable with the deceit around them. Chuck's mission had only just begun, and already the challenge was clear: to uncover the truth beneath the smiles, to separate the genuine from the deceitful, all while keeping his own identity hidden. In this delicate dance of appearances, Chuck Norris was learning to read between the lines, and nothing escaped his watchful eyes. Among the cluster of salesmen, one man stood out, a smooth-talking salesman whose every move seemed choreographed to perfection. His tailored suit hugged his frame, and his silver tongue was always ready with a practiced pitch. He noticed Chuck almost immediately, a new face in the showroom, and approached with a confident stride, his smile sharp but calculated. "Welcome. Looking for something special today." His voice was warm, but carried a hint of something rehearsed, like he'd said those words 1,000 times before. Chuck met his gaze, careful not to reveal more than necessary. "Just exploring my options," he replied casually, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. The salesman's smile didn't waver. Instead, it widened with the ease of someone used to closing deals before the paperwork was signed. As they walked toward a row of shiny sedans, the salesman launched into his well-oiled routine, highlighting features, throwing in anecdotes about satisfied customers, and weaving in enticing offers. Chuck listened, every word dissected, every phrase weighed for truth. The salesman's charm was undeniable, but so was the faint undercurrent of exaggeration beneath his polished words. What unsettled Chuck wasn't just the salesman's eagerness to sell. It was the subtle way he dodged direct answers when pressed, the quick changes of subject, and the occasional flicker of impatience when Chuck asked simple, straightforward questions. It was the kind of behavior that raised red flags for anyone who had seen too many deals crumble under false promises. At one point, the salesman leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, we always find a way to make things work here. That's how we keep our customers happy." Chuck's gaze didn't waver. "And if something doesn't work? What then?" The smile tightened just a fraction, and the salesman's eyes flickered briefly to a nearby colleague before recovering. "That's rare, my friend. We pride ourselves on honesty." But Chuck knew better. Sometimes pride was just another mask. As the salesman continued his pitch, Chuck's mind raced. This man was skilled, no doubt, a master of persuasion. But beneath the surface lurked a salesman whose words might not always match the truth. And Chuck Norris was determined to find out just how far the lies went. The salesman's pitch grew more persuasive with every word, weaving a story that sounded too perfect to be real. "This model here," he said, patting the hood of a sleek sedan, "is one of our best deals. Certified pre-owned, low mileage, and still under manufacturer warranty. You won't find a better price anywhere else." His eyes locked onto Chuck's, waiting for the impressed nod he expected. Chuck's brow furrowed. Something didn't add up. He had done his homework, and the numbers the salesman quoted were slightly off, too low, almost suspiciously so. He asked calmly, "What about the warranty coverage? Are there any exceptions I should know about?" The salesman smiled a little too quickly. "None. It's a full manufacturer warranty, just like brand new. And if there's ever an issue, we handle it all for you. No hidden fees, no surprises." Chuck noticed a flicker of hesitation, barely perceptible, but enough for a man trained in reading people. Curious, Chuck requested to see the vehicle's paperwork. The salesman shuffled through a stack of forms, producing a file that looked official but was missing some key documents Chuck knew should be there. "Those are just routine checks. Nothing major," the salesman assured, brushing off Chuck's concern with practiced ease. As Chuck pressed further, the salesman's tone shifted subtly, from friendly to defensive. "Look, these cars sell fast, and this deal won't last long. If you're serious, you should act now." The urgency was clear, a classic tactic to push a decision before doubts could surface. Inside, Chuck's instincts screamed caution. The salesman was spinning a web of half-truths and carefully omitted details. This wasn't just about selling a car. It was about bending the facts to close a deal. And Chuck knew that if he let this slide, others would be fooled too. That moment marked the first lie Chuck witnessed up close. A deal crafted to deceive, wrapped in charm, but built on shaky ground. For the first time in the undercover mission, the mask slipped, and the reality beneath began to emerge. Chuck's resolve hardened. This was exactly why he was here. Chuck stepped back from the salesman, his expression unreadable, but his mind racing. The first lie was a crack in the polished facade, a sign that there was more beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. He knew that confrontation wasn't the answer yet. This had to be a silent investigation, one that relied on careful observation and patience. He moved away from the eager salesman and blended back into the showroom crowd, adopting the demeanor of a cautious buyer exploring options. Every interaction, every glance exchanged between staff and customers became a data point. Chuck's sharp eyes caught subtle details others missed. A hurried whisper behind a closed office door, a salesman glancing nervously at his phone before answering a call, a ledger left carelessly open with numbers that didn't quite add up. Using his phone discreetly, Chuck began documenting inconsistencies. He snapped photos of contracts, jotted down overheard conversations, and made mental notes of unusual behavior. His approach was methodical, like a detective piecing together clues. There was no room for haste or reckless accusations. This was about building undeniable proof. Chuck also struck up casual conversations with other customers, listening for their experiences. One woman mentioned how she'd been promised a feature that wasn't actually included in her car's package. Another man hinted at last-minute price changes after the paperwork was signed. The stories painted a picture that aligned with the salesman's earlier half-truths. In quiet moments, Chuck observed the manager's office, noting who entered and left, the frequency of private meetings, and the expressions on faces afterward. Some employees looked relieved after these meetings. Others seemed burdened by unspoken worries. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Despite his legendary reputation, Chuck embraced the anonymity of this mission. His usual presence, commanding and direct, was replaced by subtlety and restraint. This was a different kind of battle, one fought with observation and patience, where silence was a weapon and knowledge the prize. With every passing hour, Chuck gathered more pieces of the puzzle. His quiet investigation had begun in earnest, and he was determined to uncover the full truth hidden behind the showroom's shiny exterior. Chuck's investigation deepened as he began to uncover signs of covert activity within the dealership. While blending into the background, his keen eyes caught something unusual, a small, almost imperceptible security camera tucked behind a decorative plant near the sales desks. It wasn't part of the dealership's standard surveillance system. Its angle focused squarely on one particular salesman's area. Intrigued, Chuck noted the location and made mental plans to come back later for a closer look. If someone was secretly recording conversations or meetings, it meant there was more going on than simple salesmanship. Trust was being broken in ways customers couldn't even imagine. Later that day, Chuck noticed a discarded notebook half hidden under a chair in the break room. The worn cover was plain, but when he glanced at the pages, his suspicions grew. The notes were detailed, names, numbers, and coded shorthand referencing deals, payments, and adjustments that didn't belong in official records. The handwriting was hurried but meticulous, as if whoever kept the book was tracking secrets no one else should know. Chuck pocketed the notebook discreetly, knowing it might be the key to exposing the hidden side of the operation. He observed how certain salesmen met privately in the back corridors, passing folded papers and exchanging quick, furtive glances. These secret meetings seemed to involve the slick salesman Chuck had identified earlier, confirming his central role. The presence of hidden cameras and clandestine notes painted a picture of organized deception, an underground network operating within the dealership, manipulating sales and information to their advantage. It wasn't just about bending the truth. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme designed to mislead and control. Chuck's instincts sharpened. This was no longer a simple matter of one dishonest salesman, but a coordinated effort with layers of secrecy. To dismantle it, he would need more than observation. He needed proof that couldn't be denied. As the day faded into evening, Chuck felt the weight of the challenge ahead. The hidden cameras and secret notes were silent witnesses to the truth. And with them in hand, Chuck Norris was one step closer to exposing the full story. Chuck watched quietly from a corner of the showroom as a middle-aged couple approached the slick salesman, their faces hopeful but cautious. The man and woman seemed eager to find a dependable family car, and the salesman greeted them with his usual practice charm, smiling broadly, shaking hands firmly, and speaking in warm, reassuring tones. To the casual observer, it was just another successful sales interaction. But Chuck knew better. As the salesman guided the couple toward a mid-range SUV, his tone shifted subtly, becoming more persuasive, more insistent. This model has everything you need, plus extras you won't find anywhere else, he said smoothly. And for you, I can offer a special price today that won't last. His eyes flicked briefly toward the manager's office before returning to the couple, locking in their attention. The couple asked detailed questions, clearly trying to understand the deal. Chuck observed the salesman deftly dodge direct answers about additional fees and warranty limitations. When the wife expressed concern over the financing terms, the salesman brushed it off, assuring them it was standard procedure and easy to handle. "Trust me," he said, voice low and confident. "This is a deal you don't want to miss." The couple signed the paperwork, smiles slowly replacing their earlier hesitation. Yet as they walked away with keys in hand, Chuck noticed the wife's uneasy glance toward the salesman, her smile tight. Moments later, she pulled Chuck aside under the guise of casual conversation. "I'm worried," she whispered. "They told us one thing, but I'm afraid it's not true. The fees keep adding up, and the warranty isn't what we expected." Chuck nodded, his suspicions confirmed. This was no isolated incident. The slick salesman was weaving a web of deception, tricking customers into agreements that benefited only the dealership and not the buyers. Watching this unfold firsthand hardened Chuck's resolve even more. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about protecting people who trusted the dealership with their hard-earned money. Chuck understood now the true cost of the lies, and he was ready to stop them. Chuck found himself face to face with the slick salesman once again, this time in a quieter corner of the showroom. The salesman's confident smile didn't falter as he greeted Chuck warmly, unaware of the depth of Chuck's scrutiny. "Back again? Looking for something special today?" he asked, voice smooth as ever. Without revealing a hint of his true purpose, Chuck met the salesman's gaze steadily. "I want to understand more about the deals here. There seemed to be some inconsistencies." His tone was calm but firm, a quiet challenge wrapped in civility. The salesman's eyes flickered for a brief moment, too quick for anyone else to notice, but then he smoothly masked it with a practiced grin. I assure you, everything is above board. Our deals are the best in town, and our customers leave happy. Chuck pressed a little further, dropping subtle hints about the hidden fees, the warranty exceptions, and the hurried sales tactics he'd observed. Some customers have mentioned unexpected charges and unclear terms after signing. What do you say to that? The salesman's smile remained, but his voice sharpened just slightly. There's always fine print in any contract. It's standard practice everywhere. We do our best to be transparent. His tone was polite, but edged with deflection. Chuck held his ground, letting silence stretch between them, a test of wills. The salesman didn't crack, didn't flinch. No sign of guilt, no flicker of remorse. Instead, he leaned in just a little, his eyes cool and unreadable. If you're serious about buying, I suggest you focus on the cars, not rumors. The encounter ended as smoothly as it had begun. The salesman turned away with a polite nod, returning to his customers without a trace of suspicion. Chuck watched him go, noting the ease with which the man deflected confrontation, the way his armor of charm shielded him perfectly. Despite the lack of visible reaction, Chuck knew the truth was there, beneath the surface, hidden behind the polished smile. The calm defiance only fueled Chuck's determination. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Amid the polished floors and bright showroom lights, Chuck began to notice subtle differences among the staff. Not everyone carried the same practiced smiles or wore the same confident airs. Some moved with quieter purpose, their eyes reflecting concern rather than calculation. These were the honest ones, the ones uncomfortable with the growing tension and whispers of deception. Chuck approached them carefully, starting with small talk, blending his questions into casual conversation. A middle-aged mechanic, wiping grease from his hands, hinted at frustration with how some sales tactics overshadowed the real work. It's hard to see good people get caught up in things they don't control, he said softly, eyes darting to the office where the slick salesman often disappeared. A receptionist offered guarded insight during a brief moment by the coffee machine. Not everyone here likes what's going on. Some of the newer salesmen don't agree with the pressure to push deals that aren't fair. Her voice lowered, but there was a spark of hope in her tone. Encouraged, Chuck spoke to a few more employees, service staff, junior salespeople, even a quiet accountant who managed the books behind the scenes. Each shared pieces of the puzzle. Stories of customers confused by sudden fees, colleagues' pressure to ignore questionable practices, and a general unease about the direction the dealership was taking. These conversations formed a fragile network of allies, people who wanted change but feared the consequences of speaking out openly. Chuck's presence, even disguised, brought a sense of relief, a silent promise that someone was watching and willing to stand with them. Together, they began to plan subtle ways to gather evidence and support, to shield honest employees from retaliation. Chuck realized that dismantling the deception wouldn't be a solo fight. It required trust, collaboration, and careful strategy. In the midst of the showroom's bright chaos, Chuck found strength in these quiet allies. They were the heart of the dealership, the guardians of its true spirit. And with their help, he knew he could expose the lies and restore the integrity that had been lost. The mission was no longer just his. It had become a shared fight for truth and justice behind the dealership doors. Late one afternoon, as the showroom buzzed with the usual activity, Chuck noticed a flicker of urgency among a small group of salesmen slipping toward the back room. The door closed quietly behind them, shutting out the ambient noise of the dealership. Chuck's instincts told him this wasn't a routine gathering. He waited, watching the tinted glass that shielded the room from prying eyes. Voices, low and tense, drifted through the narrow crack beneath the door. Phrases like targets, adjustments, and covering up caught his attention. The slick salesman was there, speaking with an authoritative tone that left little room for disagreement. Others nodded, some looking uneasy, but no one challenged him openly. Chuck's mind pieced together the implications. This wasn't just a casual discussion. It was a strategy meeting, a planning session for how to manipulate sales figures and silence complaints. The use of coded language and furtive glances confirmed the existence of a deeper scheme. Inside, one man laid out a folder thick with documents, spreading papers across the table. Chuck caught glimpses of figures and dates that didn't match official records, alongside handwritten notes about client dissatisfaction to be quietly handled. The meeting's atmosphere was heavy, a mixture of resolve and anxiety. As Chuck observed, he realized the stakes were higher than he'd imagined. This was organized deception at its core, involving several layers of staff and possibly reaching into management. The fear on some faces hinted at the pressure to comply, the consequences of dissent. For the first time, Chuck felt the full weight of the challenge before him. The backroom meeting was a clear sign that exposing the truth would require more than quiet observation. It demanded courage, allies, and a plan to confront a tightly woven network of lies. As the group dispersed, Chuck melted back into the showroom crowd, his resolve steeling. The secret meeting had revealed the heart of the operation. Now it was up to him to bring the hidden truths to light, one careful step at a time. Over the next few days, Chuck's undercover investigation began to yield undeniable evidence against the slick salesman. The carefully gathered notes, hidden camera footage, and first-hand accounts from uneasy employees painted a clear picture, a web of lies spun to trap unsuspecting customers. Chuck observed the salesman in action, his charm still disarming, but now showing cracks under scrutiny. At a meeting with a young couple, the salesman confidently promised a financing plan with low monthly payments and zero hidden fees. Yet, behind the scenes, Chuck discovered altered documents and falsified figures designed to maximize profit at the couple's expense. One evening, Chuck reviewed the secretly recorded conversations and saw how the salesman coached newer staff to push the line with customers, telling them only half the story and downplaying crucial details. Keep it friendly, but firm, the salesman instructed, and don't let them walk away without signing. A particularly telling moment came when Chuck confronted the salesman with a stack of altered contracts and payment plans. The salesman's confident smile faltered, replaced by a brief flash of anger and unease before he masked it with practiced ease. He denied wrongdoing, blaming misunderstandings and clerical errors, but the evidence was too strong. Chuck also learned that the salesman had been manipulating customer reviews online, posting glowing fake testimonials while burying negative feedback. This tactic kept the dealership's public image polished while the truth remained hidden from view. The web of lies extended further than Chuck had initially thought, involving complicity from certain managers and staff who turned a blind eye for their own gain. Yet, amidst the deceit, the honest employees Chuck had connected with remained steadfast, their courage quietly fueling his mission. With every new revelation, the salesman's carefully crafted facade crumbled. The lies that once seemed invisible now stood exposed under Chuck's relentless pursuit of truth. The battle was shifting, and the scales of justice were beginning to tip. Chuck knew the time was approaching to take decisive action, to unravel the web completely and restore integrity to the dealership. The fight for honesty was far from over, but the first threads had been pulled loose. With a growing pile of evidence in hand and a network of honest allies quietly supporting him, Chuck began to formulate a plan to expose the slick salesman and the hidden corruption within the dealership. He knew subtlety was crucial. A direct confrontation without proof would only give the dishonest players a chance to cover their tracks. First, Chuck coordinated with trusted staff members to gather testimonies from customers who had been misled. Together, they discreetly reached out to those who had voiced concerns but feared retaliation. The stories poured in: hidden fees, broken promises, and high-pressure tactics that left buyers feeling trapped. Next, Chuck arranged for the dealership's internal audits to be reviewed thoroughly, quietly pushing for a deeper investigation into suspicious transactions. He ensured the documentation he had collected, altered contracts, secret recordings, and financial irregularities were preserved and ready to be presented to higher management and, if necessary, legal authorities. Recognizing the power of public accountability, Chuck began planning a discreet press meeting where the gathered evidence could be shared with reporters and community leaders. He wanted to protect the honest employees and customers while making it clear that the dealership would no longer tolerate deceit. Throughout the process, Chuck maintained his undercover persona, avoiding any behavior that might reveal his true identity. His focus was on the mission, restoring trust and integrity without unnecessary drama or spectacle. He also prepared for the inevitable backlash. The slick salesman and his allies would fight to protect their positions, and Chuck knew the fight wouldn't be easy. But he had patience, discipline, and the unwavering commitment of those who refused to let dishonesty thrive. As the plan took shape, Chuck felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than a business issue. It was about justice and respect for the people who believed in the dealership and in him. With everything in place, Chuck was ready to pull the trigger. The moment to expose the truth and reclaim the dealership's honor was close. The fight for what was right was about to move from the shadows into the light. The ripple of unrest within the dealership finally reached the ears of the manager, a man known for his sharp mind and measured approach. Until now, the upper levels had remained largely unaware of the brewing storm beneath the showroom's polished surface. But the mounting complaints, quiet staff whispers, and subtle shifts in customer satisfaction had become impossible to ignore. One afternoon, the manager requested a private meeting with Chuck, still undercover, of course. The setting was a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the lot, where the manager's expression was serious but cautious. "I've been hearing things," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "Rumors of discrepancies, customer dissatisfaction, and troubling behavior among some sales staff." Chuck listened carefully, gauging the man's sincerity. He knew the manager was a critical piece in the puzzle, someone who could either help right the ship or inadvertently protect those responsible. "I've seen some inconsistencies," Chuck said carefully, choosing his words. "There are practices here that don't align with the values this dealership should uphold." The manager nodded slowly. "I agree. That's why I'm launching a full internal review. But I need solid evidence. It's difficult to act on whispers and vague accusations." Chuck shared what he could without revealing too much, emphasizing the importance of transparency and integrity. Over the next days, the manager took visible steps to investigate. He held meetings with department heads, reviewed sales records, and increased oversight on transactions. His presence brought a new sense of accountability, and some of the more honest staff found renewed hope that change was possible. Yet, the manager also faced pressure from higher-ups and shareholders wary of scandal. He walked a tightrope, balancing the need for reform with the fear of damaging the dealership's reputation. Still, his involvement signaled a turning point. Chuck realized that with the manager's backing, the tide was beginning to turn. The hidden practices could no longer hide in the shadows. The battle to restore honesty was gaining momentum, and the stage was set for the confrontation that would decide the dealership's future. Tensions inside the dealership simmered beneath the surface, growing thicker with each passing day. The slick salesman, sensing the walls closing in, became more guarded and sharp-tongued. His charm, once effortless, now carried an edge of suspicion and impatience. Whispers circulated among the staff, eyes darted nervously, and alliances shifted in the quiet war unfolding behind the showroom's gleaming facade. Chuck felt the pressure mounting. His undercover identity was a fragile mask, and every interaction risked exposing more than he intended. The once friendly nods from some salesmen turned into wary glances, and subtle barriers rose when he asked questions or lingered too long near certain offices. The dealer's world was tightening around him, and the stakes had never been higher. One afternoon, the slick salesman cornered Chuck near the financing desk, voice low but firm. "You seem interested. Just remember, not everything here is as it seems to outsiders. Best not to poke where you don't belong." The threat was thinly veiled but clear. Chuck met his gaze without flinching, the calm in his eyes masking the resolve beneath. Meanwhile, the honest staff Chuck had rallied grew increasingly anxious. They whispered of late-night meetings, hurried document shredding, and management pressure to close deals at any cost. The dealership's atmosphere felt charged, like a storm about to break. The manager's ongoing investigations added fuel to the fire, pushing the dishonest faction into defensive maneuvers. Sales figures fluctuated oddly, calls to unhappy customers increased, and some employees abruptly resigned or transferred. The cracks in the facade were widening, and chaos began to ripple outward. Chuck knew the tipping point was near. Every move he made was shadowed by suspicion. Every conversation weighed with risk. But his mission was clear: to stand firm amidst the rising storm, to protect the honest voices, and to expose the truth before the web of lies could strangle the dealership completely. The tension was unbearable, the battle lines drawn. The undercover mission had reached its boiling point, and what happened next would change everything. Late one evening, after most of the staff had left, Chuck lingered in the showroom, waiting patiently in the shadows. His heart pounded with anticipation. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Through his careful surveillance, he had learned of a secret deal scheduled to take place under the cover of darkness, one that would reveal the slick salesman's true methods. Soon enough, the salesman appeared, slipping through the dealership doors with a cautious glance over his shoulder. He wasn't alone. A few trusted accomplices followed, their faces tense but determined. They gathered near the back office, speaking in hushed tones as they pulled out stacks of falsified documents, altered contracts, and forged signatures. Chuck watched as they hurriedly swapped files, erased digital footprints on a laptop, and whispered about cleaning the books before the manager's upcoming audit. The slick salesman barked orders, directing each move with practiced authority, clearly comfortable in the shadows where his deceptions thrived. Chuck's hidden camera captured every second: the shaky hands, the nervous glances, the hurried fabrications. This wasn't just deception. It was a coordinated effort to cover up fraudulent sales and protect a network of lies. As the group dispersed, Chuck quietly slipped from his hiding spot, clutching the recorded footage and physical evidence stored on a secure device. The proof was undeniable, concrete enough to bring down the salesman and expose the deeper corruption. For the first time, the slick salesman's carefully constructed facade was shattered, not by words or accusations, but by irrefutable evidence caught in the act. The web of lies that had ensnared countless customers was beginning to unravel, thread by thread. Chuck knew this was the turning point. With the truth finally in his hands, the path to justice was clear. The battle to restore honesty and integrity was no longer a secret mission. It was a fight ready to be fought openly, with all eyes watching. The dealer's house of cards was collapsing, and Chuck Norris was standing at the center, ready to bring it crashing down. With undeniable proof in hand, Chuck knew it was time to act decisively. The quiet investigation and careful gathering of evidence had laid a solid foundation, but exposing the slick salesman and the dealership's corruption required a bold move, one that would leave no room for doubt or denial. He reached out discreetly to the manager, sharing the recordings, altered contracts, and testimonies collected from honest staff and customers. The manager's face darkened as he reviewed the evidence. There was no question left. Together, they crafted a plan to confront the salesman publicly and initiate a thorough internal review that would extend beyond the showroom floor. Chuck coordinated with legal advisors and community advocates, ensuring that the evidence was handled transparently and that customer rights were protected. He emphasized the importance of restoring trust, not just through punishment, but by rebuilding the dealership's commitment to honesty. The next morning, the dealership opened under an air of quiet anticipation. Chuck stood beside the manager in the conference room, surrounded by staff and invited reporters. Cameras clicked, and the atmosphere crackled with tension. With calm authority, Chuck addressed the gathered crowd. Integrity is the foundation of any business. When that foundation is compromised, it's our responsibility to act. We have uncovered practices that betray our customers and our values. He laid out the evidence plainly, letting the facts speak louder than any accusation. The slick salesman was called forward, confronted with the truth in front of witnesses. His confident mask faltered as the weight of exposure pressed down. Faced with the undeniable proof, he had no choice but to admit to the deceptive tactics and falsifications. Chuck's bold move sent a clear message. not only to the dishonest salesman, but to everyone watching. That dishonesty would not be tolerated. The dealership would undergo sweeping changes, with honest employees empowered and customers assured their trust was well placed. This public reckoning marked the beginning of a new chapter. Chuck's unwavering commitment to truth had turned the tide. The fight for justice wasn't just won in silence. It was declared openly, with courage and conviction. The conference room fell silent as the slick salesman was called forward, the weight of the evidence pressing heavily in the air. Chuck stood steady beside the manager, eyes locked on the man who had woven lies beneath the dealership's bright lights. The salesman's confident smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease that quickly gave way to defensiveness. Chuck's voice was calm but firm. You had every opportunity to be honest, to uphold the values this dealership was built on. Instead, you chose deception. The salesman's gaze dropped for a moment before snapping back, attempting to mask his guilt with a defiant glare. I did what I had to do to keep the business running. He spat, his tone bitter. You weren't keeping the business running. You were breaking it, Chuck replied evenly. And you betrayed the trust of every customer who walked through those doors. The room hung on his words, the tension palpable. The manager stepped forward, holding up copies of the falsified contracts and recorded conversations. These aren't mistakes or misunderstandings. This is a deliberate pattern of fraud. The salesman's defenses crumbled visibly as the mounting evidence cornered him. For a moment, the slick salesman looked around the room, at the staff he'd manipulated, the customers he'd deceived, and the community watching through the media's lens. His bravado faded, replaced by a reluctant admission. I crossed the line, but I never meant for it to get this far. Chuck shook his head. Intent doesn't erase harm. It's time to take responsibility. The manager announced the immediate suspension of the salesman, pending further investigation and legal action. As the salesman was escorted out, the room exhaled a collective breath. The showdown had been swift but necessary, a clear break from the past. Chuck's unwavering presence and unflinching demand for truth had shattered the salesman's facade. This confrontation wasn't just about one man's lies. It was a public reclaiming of integrity. The dealership, its staff, and its customers could finally begin the process of healing and rebuilding trust, grounded in the courage to face hard truths head-on. With the slick salesman removed and his deceptive practices laid bare, the dealership faced a reckoning unlike any before. Pressure mounted from all sides, customers demanding answers, local media shining a spotlight on the scandal, and corporate leaders insisting on swift and decisive action. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, policy reviews, and public apologies. Chuck, standing alongside the manager and honest staff, pushed hard for genuine reform. This dealership is more than just a business. It's a community built on trust, he reminded everyone. Together, they implemented strict new protocols, transparent pricing, clear and detailed contracts, mandatory ethics training for all employees, and an open-door policy for customer feedback. To restore faith, the dealership launched a comprehensive review of all recent sales, reaching out personally to affected customers with offers of compensation, repairs, or contract revisions. The response was cautiously optimistic. Many appreciated the honesty and commitment to make things right. Inside the dealership, morale shifted. Honest employees who once feared speaking out felt empowered, their voices heard and valued. New hires were vetted more carefully, and the management team committed to ongoing oversight to prevent future misconduct. The local community watched closely as the dealership transformed from a place of mistrust to a symbol of accountability. Chuck's role, though largely behind the scenes now, was recognized as a catalyst for change. His insistence on justice and integrity set a standard not just for this dealership, but for businesses everywhere. Legal proceedings against the salesman proceeded, sending a clear message that fraudulent behavior would have consequences. The dealership's story became a case study in turning crisis into opportunity, proving that even deep wounds could heal with transparency and dedication. Justice had been served, but more importantly, lessons had been learned. The dealer's reforms weren't just about damage control. They were about rebuilding a foundation stronger than before. And with Chuck Norris's unwavering commitment guiding the way, the dealership's future looked brighter, grounded in honesty and respect for every customer who walked through its doors. Word spread quickly throughout the community that the dealership was turning a new leaf. Customers who had once felt wary or betrayed began to notice the changes. Transparent pricing, attentive staff, and honest conversations replacing the old culture of pressure and deception. The difference was palpable, and it didn't go unnoticed. Families returned, some for their first purchase after months of hesitation, others to share stories of positive experiences. One longtime customer smiled as she recounted how the new team patiently explained every detail, answering questions without rushing. It felt like they truly cared, she said, her voice warm. That kind of honesty makes all the difference. Local media coverage shifted tone, highlighting the dealership's commitment to reform and the tangible steps taken to rebuild trust. Community leaders praised the efforts, noting that the changes set an example for businesses everywhere. Customer testimonials filled social media, spreading genuine praise that contrasted sharply with past complaints. Chuck watched quietly from the sidelines, satisfaction clear but subdued. The mission wasn't about personal glory. It was about restoring a relationship between a business and its people. Seeing customers smile, hearing their stories, and knowing the truth had prevailed was reward enough. Sales numbers gradually climbed, not from aggressive tactics, but from authentic connections. The dealership became known as a place where customers could feel confident and respected. This newfound reputation attracted a fresh wave of business, helping to heal old wounds and build a stronger foundation. Staff morale soared as well. Honest employees took pride in their work, supported by management's ongoing commitment to transparency. The dealership's culture shifted from fear and suspicion to one of accountability and mutual respect. The customer celebration of honesty restored was more than just business success. It was a community reclaiming trust built on truth and fairness. Chuck's quiet influence had helped light the path toward this new chapter, proving that even in the darkest times, integrity could shine through and lead the way forward. As the dust settled and the dealership began to thrive on its newfound integrity, Chuck gathered the team for one last meeting. The atmosphere was different, lighter, filled with cautious optimism, but rooted firmly in hard-earned lessons. Everyone was present: managers, sales staff, service technicians, and support personnel. Faces that had once carried tension now reflected respect and hope. Chuck stood at the front of the room, his gaze steady and sincere. What happened here was more than just a problem with sales, he began. It was a test of character, for each of you, for the leadership, and for the business itself. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We all make mistakes. Sometimes, we're tempted to take shortcuts, especially when the pressure is high. But shortcuts don't build lasting success. They only lead to broken trust and damaged lives. His voice was calm, but carried the authority of experience. Integrity isn't just a word. It's a daily commitment. It's how we treat each customer, how we support each other, and how we face challenges, even when no one's watching. Chuck looked around the room, meeting eyes with many who had supported the mission quietly, and those who had struggled to change. This dealership has the potential to be a leader in honesty and respect. That potential belongs to all of you. It's up to you to keep this promise alive, to hold each other accountable, and to build a culture that others will admire. He nodded with quiet conviction. Remember, trust isn't given. It's earned every single day. And when you earn it, you don't just succeed in business. You build something meaningful that lasts. As he finished, the room filled with a sense of purpose. Chuck's final words were a reminder that the real work was ongoing, that the fight for honesty and respect never truly ended. With a small, respectful smile, Chuck concluded, I came here to find the truth. Now, it's up to you to protect it. I believe you can. The team rose in a unanimous show of appreciation, ready to carry forward the legacy of integrity that Chuck Norris had helped restore. The dealership stood transformed, a beacon of honesty and respect shining brightly in the community it served. The once shadowed corners where deception had thrived were now open and transparent, replaced by an atmosphere of trust and accountability. Customers walked through the doors with confidence, greeted by staff who embodied the values Chuck had fought to restore. Sales figures reflected more than just profit. They told a story of a business reborn through integrity. The renewed commitment to ethical practices created a ripple effect. Loyalty grew, word of mouth spread, and the dealership became known not just for its cars, but for its character. Inside, the culture was different. Employees worked with pride, knowing their efforts contributed to something meaningful. The honest voices Chuck had rallied now led initiatives to keep standards high and ensure transparency remained at the forefront. Training programs emphasized ethics alongside sales skills, fostering a workplace where respect was the foundation. Chuck's influence lingered quietly in the background, a reminder that true strength comes not from power or position, but from the courage to stand for what's right. His undercover mission had exposed hidden faults, but it was the collective will of the team that rebuilt the dealership's soul. Community members praised the transformation, grateful to have a local business they could trust. Customer testimonials poured in, sharing stories of positive experiences and the genuine care they received. The dealership had become more than a place to buy a car. It was a symbol of what honesty and respect could achieve. Looking back, the journey was challenging, marked by tension, confrontation, and hard truths. But it was also a story of redemption and renewal. Chuck Norris had come as a guardian of integrity, but the legacy he left was one carried forward by every employee and customer who believed in fairness. The dealer's story was no longer about lies or shortcuts. It was about a commitment to truth and respect that would endure for years to come. This was the true legacy of the dealership transformed.